All right, let's dive in. You sent over some fascinating research about Zealandia and
Yeah.
wanted a deep dive.
It does really kind of capture the imagination,
So let's uncover this hidden continent together.
doesn't it? Yeah. This research sort of highlights a growing body of evidence that there's a mostly submerged landmass
Mhm.
right there under our noses in the Southwest Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling to think that there could be an entire continent that we've overlooked.
Yeah.
I mean, we all learned about the continents in school,
Mm-hmm.
and they seem like these, fixed permanent features.
Right.
But Zealandia flips that on its head.
Yeah, exactly. And what's really intriguing, I think, is that Zealandia's existence isn't like a sudden revelation.
Right.
It's more of a slow burning realization
Okay.
that's been building for decades as scientists have gathered more and more data.
So walk me through this. What makes scientists think this submerged landmass is actually a continent?
So geologists use four main criteria to define a continent:
Okay.
elevation, geology, crustal structure, and limits and area. And Zealandia, despite being mostly underwater,
Right.
surprisingly ticks all the boxes.
Okay, let's break that down. First
Yep.
up, elevation. How do you measure the elevation of something that's mostly submerged?
Yeah, so continents generally sit higher than the surrounding oceanic crust.
Right.
And that's because the continental lithosphere, the rigid outer layer of Earth, is thicker and less dense than the oceanic lithosphere.
Okay.
It's kind of like if you think about like a thick wooden plank and a thin sheet of metal.
Yeah.
The plank will naturally sit higher when they're both floating on water.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Um,
So even though Zealandia is mostly underwater, it's still perched higher than the surrounding ocean floor.
Precisely.
Okay.
And that's exactly what we see with Zealandia. It's significantly elevated above the surrounding oceanic crust, with some parts even poking above sea level,
Right.
like New Zealand and New Caledonia.
Wow.
In fact, Zealandia's highest point, Aoraki Mount Cook in New Zealand, reaches a height of 724 meters.
Wow. That's taller than I expected.
Uh,
But I'm guessing elevation alone isn't enough to classify something as a continent.
right.
You're right. What about the types of rocks found there?
The type of rock is crucial.
Yeah.
Continents typically boast a diverse range of rocks, from the igneous and metamorphic rocks that form the cores of continents to the sedimentary rocks that are laid down over millions of years.
And what kind of rocks has geologists discovered in Zealandia? Do they match what you'd expect to find on a continent?
They do.
Okay.
Researchers have found a wide array of rocks in Zealandia, including greywack schist, granite limestone.
Wow.
These are all telltale signs of a continental structure,
Okay.
not an oceanic one. Think of it this way. The rocks kind of tell a story about the landmass's history. And in Zealandia's case, that story points to a continental origin.
So far, so good.
Oh.
Zealandia is ticking the boxes for elevation and geology. What about its crustal structure?
Right.
That sounds a bit more complex.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's also a key piece of the puzzle. Continental crust is thicker and less dense than oceanic crust. Right.
And it's also composed of different types of rocks.
Oh.
Think of it as the foundation upon which a continent is built.
Got it.
And when we look at Zealandia's crustal structure using geophysical tools, what do we find?
Uh-huh.
A crust that's thicker and less dense than the surrounding oceanic crust.
Okay.
So it's another strong indicator of continental origin.
This is getting really interesting. But there's still one piece missing. How do you determine a continent's boundaries,
Right.
especially when it's mostly submerged?
Yeah.
And how do you know that it's not just an extension of another continent, like Australia?
Great questions.
Yeah.
That's where the fourth criteria comes in limits and area. Continents have well-defined boundaries, often marked by changes in crustal type or geological features. And critically, a continent has to be large enough to be considered a distinct entity.
Okay, so what about Zealandia? Does it have its own distinct boundaries and a large enough area to qualify as a continent in its own right?
Yes, it does. Zealandia is separated from Australia by a deep oceanic trench called the Cato Trough.
Which is floored by, you guessed it, oceanic crust.
Right.
So it's not just an extension of the Australian continent.
Gotcha.
Plus, Zealandia boasts a size of 4.9 million square kilometers, which is larger than the Indian subcontinent.
Wow.
That makes it significantly larger than many microcontinents
Right.
and even some large igneous provinces.
Okay.
It's definitely got the size and the distinct boundaries to be considered a continent in its own right.
That's incredible. I mean, to think that there's this vast, mostly submerged continent right there in the Pacific Ocean is mind-blowing. But it does raise a question.
Yeah.
If Zealandia was once part of a larger landmass, how did it end up mostly underwater? Did it just decide to go for a swim one day?
Well, not quite. Let's delve into that next.
Okay, so we've established that Zealandia checks all the boxes for being a continent, but it's mostly submerged.
Right.
It's like a continent that took a dip in the ocean and never quite came back.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, picture this. Millions of years ago, Zealandia was part of the supercontinent Gondwana, nestled alongside what would become Australia and Antarctica.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, things started to shift.
Literally.
Literally.
You mean continental drift, like those massive tectonic plates that make up the Earth's crust constantly moving and bumping into each other.
Exactly. In Zealandia's case, the tectonic forces at play began stretching and thinning the continental crust,
Okay.
much like stretching a piece of dough. Imagine taking a thick slab of dough and pulling it from both ends.
Okay.
It becomes thinner and spreads out.
So that's what happened to Zealandia.
Yeah.
It was stretched so thin that most of it sank beneath the waves.
That's the gist of it. This stretching process, combined with a phenomenon called thermal relaxation,
Okay.
where the Earth's lithosphere gradually cools and sinks,
Ah.
causes Zealandia to slowly subside over millions of years.
Okay.
It's like a giant raft gradually losing its buoyancy and settling lower in the water.
So it's not like Zealandia suddenly plunged into the ocean.
Yeah.
It was a slow, drawn-out process, almost like a slow-motion disappearing act.
Precisely. And what's remarkable is that despite this submergence, Zealandia has remained largely intact.
Hmm.
It hasn't fractured into a jumble of microcontinents, which is what often happens when continents break up.
Right.
It's more like a single cohesive landmass that's just mostly underwater.
That's fascinating. It challenges the idea that continents are these fixed, unchanging features.
Right.
They're more dynamic than we often realize.
Yeah.
But this also raises a question.
Yeah.
If Zealandia has been hidden for so long, how did we finally discover it? Was it like finding a lost city under the sea?
Well, there wasn't a single aha moment. It was more like a gradual accumulation of clues
Right.
that eventually led scientists to piece together the full picture. Early bathymetric maps,
Yeah.
those are maps that showed the depths of the ocean floor.
Right.
Hinted at something unusual in the Southwest Pacific,
Uh-huh.
but the resolution wasn't clear enough to see the full extent of what lay beneath.
So it was like having a blurry photograph of a hidden landscape.
Yeah.
You could kind of make out the shapes, but the details were missing.
Yeah.
What changed that?
Technology. Advances in satellite technology, particularly satellite gravity mapping, have revolutionized our understanding of the ocean floor.
Oh, wow.
These satellites can measure minute variations in Earth's gravity, which are influenced by the density of the material below.
Okay.
And because continental crust is less dense than oceanic crust,
Mm-hmm.
these gravity measurements helped reveal the outlines of Zealandia in stunning detail.
It's amazing how technology can unveil hidden worlds.
Yeah.
So these satellite maps basically peeled back the curtain and showed us the full extent of this submerged continent.
Exactly. And it wasn't just satellite data. Geologists also collected rock samples from the ocean floor,
Okay.
conducted seismic surveys to study the structure of the crust,
Right.
and analyzed fossil records to piece together Zealandia's history.
Wow.
It was like assembling a giant jigsaw puzzle with each piece of evidence adding to the overall picture.
It sounds like a true detective story,
Hmm.
with scientists gathering clues from all sorts of sources to solve the mystery of Zealandia.
It is.
But here's a question. Why does it even matter if we call Zealandia a continent or not? Does a label really change anything?
It's more than just a name. Recognizing Zealandia as a continent has significant implications for our understanding of Earth's history and processes.
Okay.
For starters, it provides a unique case study of continental rifting and breakup,
Right.
allowing scientists to study what happens when a continent is stretched thin and partially submerged.
Right.
It also helps us understand the distribution of plants and animals across the Pacific region.
So Zealandia isn't just a geological curiosity. It's a valuable window into the dynamic nature of our planet. And it might even help us understand how life has migrated and evolved across vast stretches of ocean.
Absolutely. And there's another aspect we haven't touched on yet, the potential for resources.
Oh, okay.
Like all continents, Zealandia likely holds vast deposits of minerals, oil, and natural gas. And its recognition as a continent could spark renewed interest in exploring and exploiting those resources.
That raises some interesting questions.
Yeah.
Who owns the right to Zealandia's resources?
Right.
Could this lead to disputes between countries?
Oh.
And how do we balance the potential economic benefits with the need to protect this unique underwater environment?
Those are all important questions, and they highlight the real-world implications of recognizing Zealandia as a continent.
Yeah.
It's not just an academic debate. It has practical consequences for resource management, territorial claims, and environmental protection.
It's a reminder that scientific discoveries often have ripple effects
Right.
that extend far beyond the laboratory of the research vessel. They can shape political discussions,
Yeah.
economic decisions,
Right.
and even how we view our place in the world.
Precisely. And speaking of viewing the world differently,
Yeah.
Zealandia's discovery forces us to rethink our traditional view of continents as these fixed, clearly defined land masses. It shows that they can be more dynamic, more fluid, and more surprising than we might have imagined.
It's a reminder that there's still so much we don't know about our planet,
Yeah,
and that even in the 21st century, there are still major discoveries to be made.
absolutely.
But Zealandia is just one piece of the puzzle.
Huh.
What else are scientists hoping to learn from this submerged continent?
Well, one area that's particularly intriguing is the New Caledonia Trough,
Okay.
a long, narrow depression that runs through Zealandia. There's a debate about whether it's floored by oceanic crust, which would suggest it's a boundary between separate tectonic plates,
Right.
or whether it represents a failed rift,
Okay.
a place where the continent started to split apart, but then the process stopped.
A failed rift.
Yeah.
So like a continent that almost broke up but then changed its mind?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
What could we learn from studying a failed rift?
It could provide valuable insights into the forces that drive continental breakup. Imagine trying to understand how a machine works. By looking at a partially disassembled version of it, that's kind of what studying a failed rift is like.
Right.
It gives us a glimpse into the inner workings of continental rifting, which could help us understand how and why continents break apart in other parts of the world.
It's like having a time machine that lets us travel back millions of years to witness these incredible geological events.
Yeah.
But I have another question. You mentioned earlier that Zealandia's submergence was partly due to thermal relaxation.
Right.
What exactly does that mean?
It's a process that's happening all around us even as we speak. Basically, the Earth's lithosphere, that rigid outer layer,
Okay.
is constantly losing heat.
Yeah.
And as it cools, it becomes denser and tends to sink.
So it's like a hot potato cooling down and becoming heavier.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to Zealandia. It cooled down, became denser, and sank beneath the waves.
That's a great analogy.
Okay.
And it's not just continents that are affected by thermal relaxation. It plays a role in the uplift of mountain ranges,
Yeah.
the formation of ocean basins, and even the movement of tectonic plates. It's one of the fundamental forces that shapes our planet's surface.
Wow. It's amazing to think that this process, which is happening all around us, played a role in creating a submerged continent.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that the Earth is constantly changing, even if we don't always see it.
Exactly. And Zealandia is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that what we see on the surface is just a snapshot in time.
Right.
And that there's a whole hidden world beneath our feet and beneath the waves that's constantly evolving.
This has been an incredible deep dive so far.
It has.
I feel like I've learned so much about Zealandia, and I've gained a whole new perspective on how continents evolve. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up this deep dive?
I think Zealandia's story is a powerful reminder that there's always more to learn,
Right.
even about things we think we understand.
Right.
It highlights the importance of scientific curiosity, exploration, and a willingness to challenge our assumptions.
It's a reminder that we don't have all the answers,
Right.
and that new discoveries can change our understanding of the world in really profound ways. And speaking of discoveries,
Yeah.
Zealandia was only recently recognized as a continent,
Right.
thanks in part to advances in technology like those incredible satellite gravity maps we talked about.
It makes you wonder what other secrets might be hidden in plain sight, just waiting for the right tools and the right questions to unlock them.
It's almost like having a new set of eyes to see the world with. What do you think the future holds for discoveries like this? What other technological advancements might help us uncover even more hidden wonders on our planet?
Well, one area that's really exciting is the development of autonomous underwater vehicles,
Okay.
or AUVs. These robotic explorers can dive deeper, stay submerged longer, and gather more detailed data than ever before.
Wow.
They're like the Mars rovers of the ocean, venturing into uncharted territory and sending back valuable information.
So we could be on the cusp of a whole new era of ocean exploration
Right.
with these underwater robots leading the way.
Yeah.
What kind of discoveries do you think they might make? Could we find other submerged continents, lost cities beneath the waves?
Yeah.
Or even entirely new forms of life?
Yeah, the possibilities are truly mind-boggling. We've only explored a tiny fraction of the ocean floor.
Right.
So there's a vast hidden world down there just waiting to be discovered.
It's a reminder that our planet still holds many mysteries,
It does.
and that the spirit of exploration is as alive as ever.
It is.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll be deep diving into another hidden continent,
Yeah,
or uncovering secrets that rewrite the textbooks all over again.
I completely agree. The exploration of our planet, both above and below the surface, is far from over. There are undoubtedly more surprises awaiting us.
This whole conversation about a hidden continent has really sparked my curiosity.
Yeah,
It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
it
What other
does.
mysteries lie beneath the waves?
It certainly does. And here's a final thought for you to ponder. Zealandia was only recently recognized as a continent, thanks in part to advances in technology. As our tools and techniques continue to evolve, we can only imagine what other wonders we might uncover, reshaping our understanding of Earth and its incredible history.
It's an exciting time to be alive, to witness these discoveries unfold,
It is.
and to realize that our planet still has so much to teach us. This has been an absolutely incredible deep dive into Zealandia. It's been a journey of discovery, a reminder of the power of scientific inquiry, and a glimpse into the hidden wonders that lie beneath the surface of our planet. Thanks for joining us on this adventure.